Max security for Maxwell. Max security for Maxwell. Those were the protests that are being led in Bryan, Texas, where Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to a minimum security facility where convicted sex traffickers are not allowed to be in that facility because it's so integrated into the community as part of a restorative justice program for the minimum security facility female prisoners who are there. It's right by Texas A&M's campus. Texas A&M campus has lots of programs with the minimum security female inmates, like raising puppies for disabled persons, education programs that benefit Texas A&M students learning to become teachers who work with the female inmates in rehabilitation type settings. So Donald Trump and Trump's DOJ, as you now know, not only gave Ghislaine Maxwell immunity from the statements that she gave to Trump's DOJ when they rushed to speak with her. They rushed to speak with Ghislaine Maxwell in Tallahassee before moving her to Texas quicker than they sent federal resources to deal with people's dying from the flash floods in Texas. And now they're giving Ghislaine Maxwell more freedom than the Texas state legislature is giving State Representative Nicole Collier, who they locked up in the Austin State Capitol building because she refused to sign a document that would give the power of 24-hour surveillance over her to the GOP, who want to monitor her to make sure she's there so that they have a quorum to implement their racist maps. Let me just show you how pissed off the community is in Bryan, Texas right now because a convicted sex trafficker has been moved into their town. I mean, think about it. Would you want to have a convicted sex trafficker move next door to you or down the block? And Trump is doing this to cover up the Epstein files. He's bringing a convicted sex trafficker into this community. Watch how pissed off the community is. I think this should be a national story to see these types of protests. But of course, corporate news wants to cover up the protests. Here, play this clip.
Ghislaine Maxwell was moved to this federal prison camp behind me earlier this month, upsetting some in our community and sparking a Saturday morning protest.
No justice! No peace!
We don't believe that Maxwell should actually be at this facility.
Members of our community marched in Bryan on Saturday morning in protest of Ghislaine Maxwell being housed at the Bryan Federal Prison Camp. The protest was organized by the Brazos Valley Community Coalition. One of the protesters, Serena Wedeking, tells me they want to raise awareness. Dawn Marshall is running for the 10th Congressional District of Texas.
I mean, she went from New York to Florida to here. Why here? Why now? And they can say, well, it's for her safety. Well, how is this place going to be safer when it has got less security? So a lot of questions aren't being answered.
Marshall also tells me that the protest is an outlet for them to feel like they're doing something by bringing visibility and information. In your neighborhood of Bryan, I'm Tyler Dupnick.
Also, just in a kind of weird set of circumstances, there was a shooting that took place in the past day or two right outside that Bryan facility. It was viewed as an active shooter situation. The police are saying it's unrelated to Ghislaine Maxwell being there. But now there was an active shooter situation that took place there that like SWAT and FBI had to respond to. So just a strange turn of events that took place. And they claim it's just a coincidence that happened, but I'll look into that one. But just to show you, Ghislaine Maxwell, she gets to go to this incredible facility where she gets to walk around, go wherever she goes. Meanwhile, you have the MAGA Republicans in the state house. They locked up a Democratic state legislator, locked her in the room on the floor of the House there until she signed away her rights to not be surveilled 24/7. So MeidasTouch got the exclusive with Nicole Collier, and here she talked about being held hostage. Republicans held her hostage, treated her like a prisoner. Here, play this clip.
Today, when quorum was restored, the speaker announced that those who had left the state for break a quorum would be required to sign a permission slip agreeing to be released into the custody of DPS so that they can ensure the return of those members so that they can have a quorum on Wednesday to pass those racist maps. I refused. I just refused to sign this piece of paper. I'm not a criminal. I'm exercising my First Amendment right to resist in my speech. And so I refused to sign. And so I was told that I was going to have to stay here on the floor. They have locked the doors. The sergeants have been instructed not to allow me to leave until I have a permission slip. Now, since we started, I have been informed that I could go to my office. So I have authority to go to my office or back to the floor as long as I'm escorted by a sergeant, and DPS will be following me.
Now, finally, the one other news that I think is important to discuss as well, the Epstein files were supposed to be turned over by the DOJ to the House Oversight Committee on Tuesday. The subpoena required a return on August 19th, but now MAGA Republican chair of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer, is saying that that the DOJ will start a rolling production on Friday, not the whole thing. They're just going to dribble it out starting on Friday, which to me just means more of the cover-up taking place. Let's bring in Talking Feds host Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel, which you all should subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. Harry, a lot to discuss here, from the protests to the disparate treatment of how a Texas state legislature is being treated versus a convicted sex trafficker, and then the cover-up. Choose your poison or medicine, I suppose. Which one?
I'll do it. Let me just see if I can remember. Let me take it in reverse order. This production, we didn't expect it, and the first of all, Comer, who is the head of the Oversight Committee, was required to send out this subpoena because a bipartisan, this is actually the one vote that took place with both Dems and Republicans. There was a majority. He had to send it along. You could have imagined DOJ trying to, wriggle out of it. And of course, at the end of the day, if there's a contempt, where does that referral go to? The DOJ. So it's a sort of rigged game. But you're right. They are producing. Now we have they've also given up the whole canard that, the real materials are in the grand jury or whatever. This is the stuff. Now there's 300 gigabytes of material. If those were just pages, it'd be a couple million. And so I think the fact that they have begun to sift a few of these and send them over to the Hill, or they say they're going to, starting imminently, there's still many, many, many ways that they can bob and weave. But, maybe they have decided after every sort of effort of diversion that, some measure of compliance is better than the kind of hole they had found themselves in and kept digging deeper. The other thing to mention about this, Ben, is the Republicans, at the same time as the committee as a whole said to DOJ, give us the docs. The Republicans, you may remember, subpoenaed 10 people who it's ridiculous to think they had anything to do with with any of the Epstein stuff. We're talking about, Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch and Merrick Garland. So all fed this talking point that Trump was selling at the time. He's since moved in 8 different directions in 6 days. But the notion was we want to hear from them. What all the R's were there. Yesterday, they had their first witness, none other than William P. Barr, the Attorney General under Trump. Now, of course, it's completely secret. It's a deposition behind closed doors. So, of course, at the break, Comer comes out and talks about what's going on, just complete indifference about the requirements of confidentiality. But he says that Barr, anyway, says he didn't know anything about an Epstein list. Also, that he didn't know anything about Trump's being implicated in any kind of criminal behavior. Basically, he doesn't know much. Not a big surprise, because it's not on his watch where all this stuff happens. Okay, that's number two. That's the first one. The second one is the one that's blowing my mind, and I feel like, what planet did I land on? So, as you mentioned, the Dems come back. A deal is cut that supposedly the Texas guys are going to get 5 new ones, and it'll be counterbalanced by 5 new blue seats in California. But in their for several days, they were trying to force them to come back, and they had nothing. They were there. There was no crime. There was nothing they could do. But now there's a spirit of vengeance or something. And they said to each of the Democrats, sign this piece of paper where you promise we can have a police officer, not to protect you, of course, but to go with you. So if you even turn in the direction of the border, they bring you back. And great scoop, by the way, really interesting talking. And I gotta agree, the facilities sleeping in the legislature, I can't imagine the foods and bathrooms and other things are quite as good as some aspects of Club Fed where Maxwell is. But she said, I'm not going to sign it. And they said, okay, you can't leave. I don't get it. I'm a former criminal prosecutor. You a former criminal defense practitioner. That's an arrest. They've arrested her. What's the probable cause? What's the crime? I don't think there's anything. It's just the narrow majority in Texas says we're going to do it, and she hasn't questioned it. But I think something's got to give here, because that's to me just a total bogus arrest. Okay, and now back to Ghislaine Maxwell. I remembered all 3 of them in the prison. First, you are right. There, I believe, I haven't trailed actually toward this prison, but I've toured other minimum security prisons. You're right, for starters, that Maxwell was ineligible to be in this prison based on her crime. That's when you first assign a prisoner, you do a few things, but one of them is the crime involved. The sexual trafficking she did means she wasn't eligible for minimum security. And unless the BOP, Bureau of Prisons, grants an exception, guess what? They did. And you got to know that was a command that came from the White House. But, the prison population is up in arms, including, mothers whose young kids come to visit them. The town is up in arms. Now, people can get really sort of really over the top on stuff like this, but it really is true that prison is integrated into the community of Texas A&M. So she's quite visible. And so I think it's part genuine fear, but it's also part, I think, the kind of visceral reaction to this favoritism she's been given for no law enforcement reason, but just for, Donald Trump's political fortunes. And I think that also just hits Americans and Texans in, kind of strikes a raw nerve that this, such a sort of special kind of facility that really is and should be reserved for people who are near getting out or are learning a trade or are really positioned to return to being constructive members of society, not the Ghislaine Maxwells of the world. So it doesn't surprise me. And at this point, right, the prison population there, much of Texas, but literally the community, the only person who gives her much solicitude is Donald Trump and Todd Blanche. But of course, that's what she's betting on, that those two, even if she's reviled everywhere else, will somehow come through with for her and reduce this 20-year plus sentence that she's now appealing to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right. This video had a very strong Texas theme but this is what they want the country to look like. And if you look at it, it's a taker state. It takes way more money from the federal government than it gives. Unlike California, gives 80 billion more than it takes. Texas takes more than 25 billion than it gives. And then you have the massive issues where Texas and Trump's federal government were woefully unprepared to respond to the flash floods. by design.
Right.
Biden wanted to fund the alarms in these communities where the flash floods took place, and they took the money and didn't use it for alarms. They used it to give themselves bonuses rather than just even give it back to the federal government. And then you have the emergency session not to deal with the flash floods, but to deal with rigging the maps and the gerrymandering. And then you have bringing a sex trafficker into their community, bringing Texas, and the Bryan community welcoming sex traffickers. Like, I'm just thinking about my town. If somebody from the nearby town threw a sex trafficker in my a convicted sex trafficker in my community, I would be livid. But they're like, take it. Why? Dear leader wants the sex trafficker here. We don't want her here. Shut up and take her. Like, okay, we don't want her. And then what's going on in their state house? They're locking up the Texas state representative because she's just saying, hey, I don't want 24-hour surveillance placed on my whereabouts. Like, well, then you're not going to leave. We'll starve you to death and we'll keep you here. And this, like, I'm just thinking you put all of those together.
I can see it. The steam's coming out of your head.
Well, I look at it too, and I'm like, look, Trump's at his lowest approval rating yet. I get it. But even in the worst polls right now, he's at like 37, 38 to 40%, which is historically low. But I'm still looking. And I guess the part about me that's, I look at the 37 to 40% and I'm like, are your lives either that miserable where you like this stuff, or do you just take so much joy in other people suffering and in owning the libs and in the racism and in seeing ICE treat people like cockroaches that just gets you so jolly that you take a shitty life? Like, I'm just like, what? How do you like this for your existence? Anyway, Aaron, we could talk.
Two quick points. Yeah, so I hear you. But first on Maxwell, housing sex offenders, nobody wants to be the one next door to them, but somebody's got to be, except here, everybody's got a valid complaint because she shouldn't be in this facility in the first place and with this degree of liberty. So, everybody has an understandable beef. And then the second point that on this is both of our backyards, right? When what's been characteristic of the military invasion is, unlike everywhere else in history where it's been designed to work, like, wow, we are overloaded here. Please come on in, feds, for just a couple days until things can kind of, the ship can right itself. It's the opposite. It's California saying, don't come in. We're fine. There is no emergency. Same thing in DC. And if you do come in and take over our National Guard, guess what? This is like Santa Ana Windsor. We need them for real stuff that's going to be happening any moment. Now, it so happened that, this was done quietly, not at all the sort of fanfare of bringing everyone in with the masks and the boots. They've now largely withdrawn. They're down to just a couple hundred. So those resources have returned to the people of California. But the fact of what they were doing, taking them basically from what California needed at the potential of, health and welfare costs to the people of California. And why? Basically to make a big strongman point. And, this is even more pitched in DC, where anyone who's ever lived there, the neighborhoods of monuments and are just swarming now with agents. It feels like an occupied nation's capital, and they're not there because the officials in Washington want them there. They're there to throw their weight around Cal and intimidate the nation's capital. Ugly, ugly stuff.
Harry Litman, Talking Feds. Appreciate you as always.
I got all three. I'm proud of myself.
I mean, look, you did clerk for 2 Supreme Court. Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers here. More importantly, subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube, the Talking Feds Substack, and the Talking Feds podcast. Thanks, Harry.
Thanks, Ben.
Can't get enough Meidas? Check out the Meidas Plus Substack for ad-free articles, reports, podcasts, daily recaps from Ron Filipkowski, and more. Sign up for free now at MeidasPlus.com.